Namaste. Welcome back to Smriti. Today we have Dr. Jambunathan back again. He is leading us in explaining our Shastras, particularly Nyaya Shastra. In the channel of Vedanta, he's been elaborating on Darsana scriptures. A lot of information has been said so far. In the previous episode, Dr. Jambunathan addressed the ancient Nyaya Shastra. And in this episode, he is going to take us on a journey, giving information on medieval and going into the future. We are just following the timeline of the origin of Nyaya Shastras, the depth of knowledge in it. And what do we have today, Dr. Jambunathan?
Namaste to all.
Namaste.
Happy Diwali to all our viewers.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me to speak here. Yes, I think we were talking about from the Rishi's time of Gautama Rishi up to the time of Vachaspati Mishra during our last session. And, the history of Nyaya evolution, as I was discussing last time, goes parallel with also the Buddhist and the Jainist systems in India. And actually, each of them have enriched each other in terms of logic and analysis of things on the universe. So I think I just recapitulate just a few minutes what we covered last time, so that to get everybody up to speed, and then we'll try to go along on the same line here.
Yes, please.
So we talked about Nyaya Shastra being one of the Shad Darshanas as a way of interpreting the Vedas, and it is developed by we all told this is all considered part of the worship of God itself. Lord Shiva himself says that, and Parvati also says in the Kurma Purana, the Shad Darshanas, are a way of even worshipping, people doing a knowledge form of worship for the Lord. And we said that the Gautama Maharishi was associated with Ahalya, and Lord Ramachandra in the Ramayana was kind of the person who actually brought it to the world for all of us. And then Akshapada Gautama, who lived later also, was the one who developed the Nyaya Sutras. And then it comes from Nyaya Sutras. We talked about the Nyaya Bhashya by Vatsyayana Rishi. And then Udyotkara wrote the Nyaya Vartika. And that was where we were talking about, how the Nyaya Sutras were developed in parallel with the Buddhist philosophy. After Buddha himself, there was a famous philosopher called Nagarjuna. And we discussed some of these terms last time of these names, Vasubandhu, Dignaga. These are all great Buddhist monks and Buddhist philosophers. And, the whole idea of using logic as a way of debate and trying to justify their philosophical positions, was used. We talked about there are a lot of warfares in other types of religion, but interestingly, Buddhism and Hinduism did not have that much of warfares, but more of intellectual debates, and which mutually contributed to the growth of both of each other. I think the key point to know is the Nyaya Shastra starts with, we see a lot of things around us. Every day when we wake up, we see humans, we see animals, we see plants, and we see rocks and mountains. We see those inanimate things as well as animate things. So the first point which came up in Nyaya Shastras is, we see so many things. How do we define these things? Can we put them in categories like we see millions of things? Are there really millions of things, or there are only just some categories where you can include all of those things under those simple categories? So that's what we call the categorical method. And that's what became the Prameyas, which is the objects around the world. What do you see? Can we simplify the objects, what we see around us, and put them in small baskets? Instead of learning about million things, you learn about those major baskets, and once you know that, you can expand from each one of them. So again, the main the debate with the Buddhist was, okay, you see all these things around you, how real are they? Are they real? Are they unreal? Or are they somewhere between real and unreal? Because the classic example, even if the Adi Shankara says, is every day all of us sleep for 7 to 8 hours in the night. When you sleep for 7 to 8 hours in the night, you are not aware of yourself. You are not aware of things around you. So for almost 8 hours a day, you don't know things around you. even though they are existent. So the question is, if they are really existent, how did they disappear for that time period? Is it because you disappeared during the time period? So somebody had to disappear for the time period. Either you, the so-called you, disappeared for the 8 years or 8 hours, or the things around you disappeared around for 8 hours. So even Adi Shankara raises these questions, in his Bhashyas, how do you define the reality of things around you? And same thing, some people see dreams. And sometimes dreams are bad, that you wake up from the dream. So though the dreams are not real, but they still cause a reaction for you. Some dreams we call nightmares. They make you wake up, and they even make you fear for almost 1 or 2 days. Oh man, I had such a bad dream. And so even though the dream was kind of an unreality, it causes real effects on you.
Sure.
So the question is, so are dreams then real too? So what is the level? So these are the questions our philosophers started asking. How real are the things? Because they disappear from your own sight, and things which you don't cause, things are real, but they still cause effects on your life. So this kind of questions went on, and because and then once you see these things, how do these things come about? Well, or have they been existent forever? Or does somebody create them? And once they are created, there is a lifespan for each of these? All these questions started coming up. Okay, number one, what is the reality of things you see? Number two, whether they are real or unreal, how did they come about? And number three, even when they come about, how long do they exist? Okay, you exist for 80 or 90 years, and then you pass away. Do these things still exist after you go, or what happens? So all these questions, so these were the philosophical questions which came about. And the Buddhists, their argument was nothing is real. And the best example is there are a lot of subdivisions within Buddhism. We call the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Yogacara, Madhyamika. These are all the different subdivisions within Buddhism, and each of them have their own theories. And according to them, instead of going to the depths of that, the simple point is they call Kshanikavada, Kshanika. Kshanika means in Sanskrit just momentary things which last for a moment, few seconds, few minutes, Kshanikam. Whereas things which last long we call Dirgham. When things are lasting forever, we call Dirghayus, which means live for a long time, means Dirghayus means you live for a long time. So Dirgha and Kshanika, they're opposite. Kshanika means momentary, Dirgha means long. So according to Buddhist theory, everything is Kshanika, which is nothing is permanent. It's the best example they give is like a tornado. We see tornadoes in the United States. What happens when a tornado comes? It's like a whirl of wind. It pulls everything into it. You can see, especially in the movies, they will tell you it even pulls cars. It pulls houses into it. The bigger the tornado, it can pull things around it. It whirls around. It pulls the leaves, trees, everything into it. It whirls around for a few minutes, and then it disappears. And when it disappears, it drops the things off. So it pulls things together, keeps them for some time, and then drops them after some time. So that's what the Buddhist theory is. Same thing. Though you see things to be stable, they are not really stable. They're really assembly of things together, and each of them has a lifespan, and then they again disentangle. So it's assembly and disassembly of things, which is constantly happening. Some of them, like tornadoes, you can see with your own eyes when they assemble, when they disassemble. And the tree which you see in front of you, even the tree is not a stable tree. He says even our own body, if you think about the human physiology, your cells are continuously changing. Though you think your skin is the same, the skin what you have is not the skin what you had 2 months ago, because even the skin layers are constantly peeling. In the snake, we can see that the snake peels off its skin very obviously, but even humans are peeling their skin. Our skin cells are being rotated every few hours, every few days. So the layer of skin keeps changing. Same, the layer of your stomach keeps changing. All these cells are being shed and new cells are being generated. All these keeps on going. So, though you see yourself as a stable person, but even within you, things are not really stable. If you put each part of your body under a microscope, you're going to see they're changing every second. Same thing if you go to a tree, same thing. Though the tree looks stable, things are continuously changing inside the tree. So that's what the Buddhist theory is. Nothing is stable. Everything is just an assembly of things for some time, and then they disassemble. So nothing is a stable entity. So there is really no reality. So that's the bottom line, what the Buddhist theory says. And the Nyaya theory says everything is real. So that's the major difference, whatever you see, you perceive, they are real, because they can ask you, okay, if you are drinking water, you can feel whether it's cold or hot. How do you say it's not real? And you walk on the sun, you feel the hot, and you go to the shade, you feel the cold. You can experience your own body, why it's not real. And there's the Buddhist logic goes beyond, instead of going to depth, they have their own explanation for each thing. So let's not say they were all just they have a very valid explanation. At least they consider it as valid for all these things. Why do you feel the heart? There is explanation for that. And same thing. So there was a main debate because the Nyaya theory rests on reality. The Buddhist theory relates on unreality or impermanent reality. So that's how the main thing is, because the question comes is, why is it important to know whether things are real or unreal? Because if things are unreal, you can actually deny God. Okay, there is no God at all. Everything just randomly assembles, randomly breaks down and go. But then if you're not using the term random, you think, no, everything is governed by a law. The sun moves around with a particular speed. The moon moves in the speed. The stars are there and the stars are kept in position. Vishnu Nigam Viryani. It says all the things are by the power of Vishnu, everything is held in place. That's what the Vishnu Sahasranama says. Vishnu Nugam Viryani, by the strength of Vishnu, all the things, the planets are kept in place. Because that even during eclipse, it's a very surprise when you look at the gravitational forces which happen during eclipse. The question is, why is not Earth ripped off its orbit? Because when the certain things come together, the mutual attraction of the forces can actually rip things off. So again, the question is, why in eclipse still the Earth is still in its own place? They say again, the grace of Vishnu is what is keeping it in the place. Though if you look by physics, it should be ripped off, from its place by the various, electromagnetic forces and the gravitational forces acting together. So again, the question is, if you deny reality, you can also deny God easily. So the Nyaya always wants to insist on reality, because if we say things are real, things are not random, things are very organized, then you can tell there's an organizer behind all these things. So things cannot be organized just like that. Somebody has to play a meticulous role in the way things evolve, things, when to give the rain, when to give the heat to the world, all those things. So there is all organized. So if there's an organized, then there's somebody organizer behind that. So again, that's how they define. So the more the Nyaya wants to define reality, because if you can define reality, you can define there is a regulation, then you can bring a regulator into the picture. Whereas if you think everything is random, everything is momentary, everything is unreal, then you can still live in the world without the thought of God. That's how, the main issue comes up. So that's, again, so that's why the Nyaya, every time the new Buddhist philosophers come, they will try to define more and more how unreal things are. And each generation of Nyaya philosophers have to come to generate how real things are. So that's how the things go, like Nagarjuna to Vasubandhu, Dignaga, Dharmakirti. They were the famous Buddhist philosophers. Whereas Akshapada, Gautama, Vachyayana, Udyodhara, Vachaspati Mishra, Udayanacharya, they were the great logicians. They were the Brahmana logicians, who were the people who believed in God, who knew the Vedas, and they were using logic, to expound the truths. And then came the period. So this is, the ancient period, we would say goes from Akshapada Gautama to Vachaspati Mishra. And then, so again, and even the Nyaya period, you can put them under three different groups. The first phase of Nyaya was to define categories. Like I said, what are the categories, what you see on the universe, how do you classify them, how do you put each thing in a basket, all those things were the categorical method. Then came the big difference between Atma and Brahman, which means the Buddhist theory is, like I said, everything is momentary. So and there is nothing real. Whereas the Nyaya theory based on the Vedas say no, beyond your human body, there is an entity called Atma. That Atma is stable. Your human body keeps changing. It is like the screen in the theater. You go to the movie theater, the white screen is stable. Whereas the movie changes. You see one movie today, you see another movie today. The movies are continuously changing, but the white screen is permanent. Same way, the Atma is a stable thing, whereas the mind and the body, even your own mind, you're happy today, you're depressed tomorrow, your mind keeps changing, your body keeps changing. Like I said, your skin keeps changing every minute or second. So the Atma is stable, but everything else is kind of temporary or continuous in motion. Same way, the universe too, there is a permanent Brahman or the universal reality which is stable, but the seasons, what you see, the different things in the nature, which is, they keep changing. Like how in your body there is one stable thing and a lot of unstable things. Same way in the universe, there is one universal reality which is very stable. It's like the big movie screen. In the big movie screen, things in the universe keep changing every time, you know. So you see the Kaveri river is flowing with water one time, then there is no water again. So again, all those are the changing things in the universe. You know, you go to the Alps mountain this year, there is a lot of snow, then there is a lot less snow sometimes. So again, these are all changing things in the nature, but there is a permanent reality behind these. So I think, so that's how they say there's a permanent reality behind the body, there's a permanent reality behind the universe. And Adi Shankara says those two realities are the same. And Ramanujacharya says, no, they are not the same. One is separate from the other, but both of them are two independent realities. That's the difference between the Jivatma and the Paramatma. One of them says they are the one and the same. The other person says, no, they are two realities, but they are two independent realities. So in that way, Adi Shankara, Ramanuja and all, they all, you know, in one way agree with the Nyaya. There is there is reality. But the question comes, so that is the second, so the second phase of Narayana. The first phase of Nyaya was just defining the categories. The second phase of Nyaya became a big point of defending there is a reality behind your human body. There is a reality behind the creation. Because the more you go to Buddhist logic, they will prove again and again things are changing, things are changing. So the Nyaya also had to come to one point and say, yes, things are changing, but beyond the things are changing, there is stable reality too. So that's when the famous Atma Tattva Viveka and Nyaya Kusumanjali, those are two things which all Hindus should know. Atma Tattva Viveka is, both of them was by the great Udayanacharya, who lived in the 10th century. And, you know, Udayanacharya is, you know, everybody tells he's like the sun who came to dispel the darkness of ignorance. And those were the two important works. Though there is the Atma Tattvam, Brahma Tattvam, everything is already mentioned in the Upanishads and the Vedas. He didn't tell anything new. They were already there. Only thing is the Buddhist theories, the logic was going so strong that people begin to doubt, is there a real reality anywhere? So, you know, you need to get these works to substantiate by logic, you know. So you can, so there is to prove the existence of Atma by logic, to prove the existence of the universal creator by logic. So that's what the Atma Tattva Viveka did and the Nyaya Kusumanjali did. The Nyaya Kusumanjali was specifically directed towards proving an eternal creator. And the Atma Tattva Viveka was there to prove by logic there's an Atma behind all these unstable mind and body things. So those were the two important works. And actually they say that they were like final nail in the coffin for the Buddhist philosophies. And so it was once you use strong logic, you know, the Buddhists were not able to defend strongly after that. And that's when the philosophical part of Buddhism began to wane down in India. So, and then it did get established in other parts of the world, you know, China, Japan, Korea, all these are still Buddhist countries. There's nothing, but in India, you know, these seminal works were the ones which, you know, played an intellectual decline of the Buddhism, I would say.
Interesting. So they use Nyaya in our everyday colloquial transactions. So is the same Nyaya and what Nyaya we are talking, are they different?
No, again, you know, that then comes the, you know, the in our religion, you know, the Nyaya is so intrinsically related to religion. You know, it's not separate like Western logic. Western logic is used for just analyzing your regular things and things. In India, the Indian logic, it's always tied to religion. There is no separate of logic as an entity by itself. Logic was used, like I even mentioned in my first lecture, Nyaya was used as a supplement, for the having a strong basis for the religion. So the Nyaya, when it developed, like I said, when I was mentioning the first lecture too, the Nyaya Darshana has different parts to it. The ultimate goal of Nyaya was only two things. How do you get relieved from, because everybody, this is the same thing, Adi Shankara says, Punarabi Maranam, Punarabi Jananam, everybody is born and reborn. There is a lot of problems in the earth. How do you get relief of these problems? We call apavarga. There is two terms which we use in our philosophy, bhoga and apavarga. Bhoga means pleasure. Bhoga means you're enjoying pleasures.
Yeah.
Apavarga means you are having no pain. So having no pain is called apavarga. And bhoga is pleasure, bliss, happiness is all that called. And there is again the definition difference of moksha. But according to Nyaya, the whole idea of Nyaya was, how do you get relief from pain? The whole life is a painful procedure. How do you get relief from pain? So the end point of Nyaya is you can use logic and use whatever thing, but their ultimate goal was, how do I get relief of pain from the problems? So that was the Nyaya was always tied, and again their goal was, you should try to seek liberation while living, and this process of getting liberated is how you get relief from pain. So that's why again the relief of pain was linked to liberation or moksha, whatever you call, and how to attain that moksha became the most important goal for all our Indian darshanas. So because if you try to work on liberation, you try to achieve moksha, that's the way you get rid of pain. And some people said not only you get rid of pain, you get pleasures also. The bhoga also come. There's a bhoga and apavarga together, but some people will believe only there's apavarga. So the whole Nyaya is only tied to that. But as when the nuts and bolts of Nyaya came, because they had to start defending. So one is to define a theory for yourself. How do I get relief from pain? But the second thing is, if somebody is constantly attacking you and tell your theory is wrong, your theory is not correct, then okay, one problem is to get relief of pain, but one problem is, how do I sustain my concepts? Because if somebody is constantly attacking my concepts, I have to keep my concepts alive. Only if I keep my concepts alive, I can then focus on my practical part. And that's how the debate part all came after that. So the Nyaya part has that how to logically debate, how to define things, how to prove things. So those are the things which came as subsidiaries for that. The main goal was moksha or apavarga or relief of pain, and then came the definition, defending the concepts against other attacks. And then to do all those things, the Nyaya Darshana evolved itself. So that's why you can actually tease out the logical explanations of Nyaya too. So the logical debates, defining of categories, or all the things which Nyaya really helped us to. So when you go, there is a way of, for example, the Nyaya Darshana will give you, they call 5-member syllogism. They call Pratigya, Hetu, Udaharana, Upanaya, Nigamana. So these are the 5 terms. It's called 5-membered syllogism. It's basically, Pratigya means you make a statement. The statement is, today is a rainy day. That's a statement. Okay. You have to prove it. Then you go and tell, I went outside, I got wet, my ground was wet, I actually had water falling on me from above. So because of all these proofs, I tell today is a rainy day. Because you cannot just say rainy day, tell me why do you say it's a rainy day. So you have to give all these explanations. That's what the hetu comes. The pratigya is just a statement, today is a rainy day. But the hetu is, okay, give me proof. Why are you telling it's a rainy day? Then you go on listing all these things. And, so somebody will say, okay, you're getting wet. Well, you can get wet even if somebody pours milk on you. Why are you telling you're getting wet from water? Then you have to give the udarana, upanaya. So again, there are each step. You can actually, somebody can counteract on each step. Okay, your garden is wet, but your garden could be wet for another reason. Why do you tell it's water which makes your garden wet? So that's the nuts and bolts of the logic debate, So you just start with the statement and then you go step by step and then you have to prove that, okay, today is a rainy day because of all these things. You come back to the Nigamana is the conclusion. Okay, I have explained you all these things. So that's why I'm again restating the fact today is a rainy day. So I'm giving a simple statement. So it starts with Pratigna and ends with Nigamana is the conclusion. So this is just the same. I'm just giving a very simple example here. So basically the logic, same way the logic has to define, okay, you say that mind. What is the mind? How do you prove there's an existence of a mind? Because mind is something you cannot see. Mind is something which you have to believe. Even the psychiatrist cannot show you the mind. They can show you this part of the brain is responsible for this or that or that, but they cannot really show you what is called a mind. And everybody has the same type of the brains, but one is always depressed, one is always happy. Okay, your brain and his brain looks exactly the same, but why is he always happy? Why is he always depressed? You can tell that these chemicals are low in his brain, these chemicals are high in his brain, but those things you got to believe after some point. You cannot see those chemicals with your own eyes. So that's how, some of these things, so that the Nyaya has to define all those categories. So then the third part of, so this is the second part of Nyaya is defining the realities of Atma and the Brahman came. And then the third, okay, once the Buddhism part of Nyaya went, the problem came between the Vedanta and Nyaya itself. Vedanta is again, there is Adi Shankara Vedanta. The Vedanta is Adi Shankara has his own interpretation of Vedanta. Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, all those great philosophers and saints, they interpret it a little differently to the Vedanta. Vedanta is, though we call Vedanta, the Vedanta is like different parts. It's not uniform Vedanta for everybody. The Vedanta of Ramanujacharya is a little different from Vedanta of Shankaracharya. And so the Vedanta means end of the Vedas or conclusion of the Vedas. Okay, Shankara says, this is my conclusion of the Vedas. Whereas Ramanuja says, this is my conclusion of the Vedas. So Vedanta just means conclusion or end of the Vedas. But what is the conclusion? There is a difference. And again, they use Nyaya concepts a lot. In fact, Adi Shankara, that's when the Anirvachaniya, which is called indefinable. And that's where Adi Shankara takes the middle path, because the Buddhism is one path which says everything is unreal. The Nyaya says everything is real. Whereas Adi Shankara is the only person who used the word Anirvachaniya, which is indefinable. Vachaniya means able to tell or speak. Anirvachaniya means beyond the ability to speak or describe. It is indescribable. It is unspeakable. That's what when you use the term Anirvachaniya says, you see all these different entities in the universe, but you cannot really define them. They are there, but you cannot categorically tell them they are real too. So Adi Shankara is not completely unrealistic. He doesn't deny the existence of the universe, but he says it's indescribable. I am not going to commit itself as true or real. So that's where Adi Shankara takes the middle path. He doesn't accept the pure reality of what the Nyaya says. He doesn't take the pure unreality or momentary or Shanikavada of what the Buddhist says. He says it's actually indescribable. The Maya, everything is by the creation of the Maya, and this entire universe is indescribable. Whereas Brahman is a definable truth. So he says that that says Brahman Satya, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmayona Para is the very famous statement of Adi Shankara. Brahman is truth. Brahman Satya, Jagat Mithya, the entire universe is an illusion. He says it's not unreal, it's not Asatya, it's not Satya, but it's illusion. So there's a difference between Asatya, Satya and Mithya. Satya is absolute truth, Asatya is absolute false, whereas Mithya is illusion, which is in between. You cannot deny its existence, but at the same time you cannot define it also. So again, these are all based on, starts with Nyaya concepts of defining things on the thing. So when the Nyaya evolved, okay, the Nyaya drove the Buddhists, then the fight came actually between Nyaya and the Vedanta itself. That was the last part of the logic. So the ancient part of logic was categorical definitions. The medieval part of the logic was defining the Atma Tattvam and the Brahma Tattvam and to defend against the Buddhist philosophies. But the Navya Nyaya, which is the era of modern logic, became more a fight or debate between the Nyaya and Vedanta itself. And whereas Nyaya keeps insisting, so they had to develop new, because again, when you get attacked more and more, That's when you also have to refine yourself more and more. So the Nyaya became more precisional. They defined things much more better. They defined with more precision. The so-called Navya Nyaya. The modern logic became more precision because now they have to defend against Vedanta itself. When Vedanta says things are indescribable, we have to still maintain the reality. So, there is very lot of, there's a famous poet called Sri Harsha, who wrote the famous Naishada Charitra. He wrote a book called Kandana Kandakadya to defend Adi Shankara's theory of indefinability. You cannot define anything really. And the entire Nyaya had to now start. Udayanacharya defended against Buddhism. Then Gangesh Upadhyaya came from Mithila and then settled in Bengal. He began to defend the Nyaya against the attacks of the Vedanta, which maintained the indescribable theory versus the pure reality. So now what happened is for Nyaya is what started as a Prameya Shastra, which is defining categories, now became a Pramana Shastra. They have to define the knowledge itself. Okay, how do you acquire knowledge? Which knowledge is truth? How do you define the limits of knowledge? Okay, I can see things which we call pratyaksha, which means I can see a tree in front of me. I can see an animal in front of me. But let's say you're an eagle, you can see things 40,000 feet away from you, whereas a human cannot think 40,000 feet away from you. So for you, anything within what your eye sees, only that you can see. Beyond that, you cannot see. You can only guess. Whereas the eagle can see much longer than you, much larger vision. Same thing, the bats, BATS, we call Vowal in Tamil, bats. Their hearing frequency is much more than you. Human hearing is only 20 to 20,000 hertz. So if you go beyond 20,000 hertz, the frequency, you cannot hear those frequencies. Whereas the bats can hear up to 100,000 hertz frequencies. So that's how we believe our rishis were like bats. They can hear all these cosmic sounds, and that's how they could hear all these and give us the Vedas. So just because you cannot hear more than 20,000 hertz, don't say there is nothing more than 20,000 hertz. There are sound frequencies beyond that particular thing too, which you cannot hear, but some you cannot hear. So that's why the pratyaksha became the point. Is pratyaksha, okay, pratyaksha means you see things every day, but there is a limitation. Even there's a limit between what you can see and what the eagle can see. And then some of the rishis, when they did tapas, they can sit and see what's there. They're somewhere in corner of India, they can see what is happening in Indraloka. Our rishis have divine vision. They could see beyond the universe, beyond our normal thing. So if you believe that the eagle can see for 40,000 feet, then you have to believe the rishis can see far more than that too when you did more tapas and when you purified yourself. So basically, there is pratyaksha. I mean, because today I believe only what I see. That's what most people say. But your belief is you can only see so many things. There are people who can see more than you. So even the pratyaksha has a limitation. That's when so we accept pratyaksha as a source of knowledge. Like what we see, we believe. But there is a limit what the pratyaksha can take you. Same thing, there is anumana. Anumana means inference or logical deduction. Which means, for example, if you're driving a car, you go by a mountain, you see a big smoke. Then you tell your family there's a big fire in the mountain. You really did not see the fire. You're only seeing a big smoke. But because you have seen fire with smoke coming out before, you had homas in your home, or you had something burnt in your home, you can see the fire, and on top of the fire, you see the smoke. You're guessing and telling you don't see the smoke fire, but you're seeing just the smoke. But you're telling, I'm thinking there's a big fire behind this mountain. You're telling, but you're not seeing it, and that's what we call logical deduction, because you have seen the association before, and now you're only seeing a part of it, but you can still. But again, is this always the truth? Sometimes in the winter, you can see a big mist. The mist can make you look like smoke. For example, if you travel to Africa and you go to the famous Victoria Falls, like a Niagara Falls here, there's a falls called Victoria Falls in the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe. You go to the falls, The falls from a very height. And when the water falls down from a great height, it develops a big mist. So actually, when you go near the falls, you cannot, if you're seeing the waterfalls from a distance, you can see only like a dense smoke. You cannot see you will hear the sound of the water, but you can only see a dense smoke. But as you get closer and closer, like within 50 feet, you can see the actual waterfalls. So there is the waterfalls there, but you see a dense smoke covering entire the waterfall. This is people who go to Zambia, Zimbabwe, they can see it. That's true. I mean, I'm just telling there are other waterfalls to be generated. So even a water mist can look like a smoke. Basically, so if you look like a smoky thing, you think it's fire. But sometimes the smoky thing can be just made of water also. What looks like a smoke is probably a mist. So again, the inference has its limitations. So though you can logically deduce things, so this is what our scripture is telling. Okay, pratyaksha is that you believe in what you see, you believe in what you deduce, but there is limitation there also. And that's when we go to the scriptures, because we believe in the Vedas and the Puranas, and they describe things which is beyond your human limits, but we believe they are true because our rishis could see them. You cannot see them. Like the bats could hear certain frequencies, the eagle could see a particular distance. Our rishis had the far vision and the far hearing, and they were able to get all those things. So the Nyaya, included the Vedas. They said, okay, we believe in pratyaksha, we believe in anumana or logical deduction, but we also believe on the scriptures which explain things beyond our normal perception and normal influence. So that's when the Nyaya begins to include the Pramana Shastra. They began to define what is pratyaksha, what is anumana, what is shabda. Shabda is the scriptures are called shabda because you hear it. Somebody recites the scriptures, you can hear it. That's why it's called Shabda Pramana, means the scriptures are called Shabda Pramana. Pratyaksha Pramana, Anumana Pramana, Shabda Pramana. So those became the important sources. So, and again, these were the same sources used by other people belonging to the Vedic religion too. The Vedanta also began to use the same Pratyaksha, Anumana, Shabda categories, what the Nyaya defined, how to define things. So that's what the logic evolved from categories to proving the creator and the Atma, and then proving the different Pramana Shastras and how they help us in learning about things. Because you need to know, how are you learning first? Okay, I'm learning these things. How do you learn? I'm learning because I'm seeing. Okay, what you're seeing, is it accurate? Because if you're not seeing accurate, your learning is completely wrong. So the Nyaya has to define the boundaries of knowledge. So it has to say what are the sources of knowledge, but it also has to say the boundaries up to which level you can believe this knowledge, and beyond which this knowledge is not reliable beyond this particular level. So the Pramana Shastra became like that. It has to define the sources of knowledge as well as the boundaries of knowledge. So that's how the logic evolved. And I think I want to stop today with that.
Very nice. Thank you so much. What a clarity you have brought. So much of information and very, very valuable. And definitely it will be applicable in the present day dealings that we do, learning and operating as well. Thank you so much for such a enlightening message. And what do we have? What would you be going into in the future?
In the next future, now we have given the broad categories of what the Nyaya Shastra, and I will talk a little bit about the evolution of modern logic, because I covered Udayanacharya today and his theories. I want to go a little bit in the next year about the Tattva Chintamani, which was the most defining book of modern logic, and tell how that particular scripture actually changed the way for everybody, not only for the Nyayas. It changed the way of even how the Vedanta begin to look at things, and all those things. We will talk about that. And then, as we go in the future, we'll go to the nuts and bolts of this Pratyaksha, Anumana, and the defining and the limits of debates, and how do you say you won a debate or how you lost a debate. If you see presidential debate, all these things, by what criteria you can say this person won the debate? So again, the Nyaya is the one who actually defined all those things. It taught only not how to debate, but it also told you when can you declare a winner in a debate. So those are things which came there,
Oh, just beautiful. I can't wait for that. And thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you all viewers. Thanks for visiting Smriti. Yes, this is an enriching repository of valuable knowledge of our ancient, and also we are still speaking it. We want to preserve it and use it mindfully. And I really appreciate, and there are so many scholars that are putting in their valuable time. They want to contribute and keep it going. Please do visit our main repository at smriti.upasana.net, and please follow and subscribe to YouTube channel Upasana. We do have a Facebook page, Smriti Talks. Thank you so much. Do stay with us. Namaste.